The next topic, children, in your chapter is price. The price of a commodity is the unit or amount of money that has to be given to get this commodity, right? The price of a good or a service expressed in monetary units, that is the money units, is also called absolute price or money price, right? Prices are the very essence in a free enterprise economy. Free enterprise economy is a capitalistic economy. So everything that is sold and purchased in a free enterprise economy is with the help of price only. Goods and services have prices because on the one hand they are useful and on the other hand they are scarce in relation to the amount which people would like to have. Obviously, if something is available in abundantly, then you won't be paying any price for that commodity, such as water and air. They are useful, but they are available abundantly, so you don't pay any price for these commodities, right? Then goods like air, water, the same thing. Air, water, they are the free gift of nature and they are known as free goods, and so they do not command a price. By contrast to natural goods, economic goods are scarce and they command a price, right? Economic goods are produced by using factors of production or resources, so they command a price because the resources which are used to produce these goods, they are also scarce. So the goods that are produced with these scarce resources are also scarce, and so they command a price. All right, then so goods and services are available at a price because it involves some cost in producing these goods, right? When you are manufacturing something with the help of different things, with the help of factors of production, raw material, right? When you combine all these things, when you are manufacturing a commodity, it definitely involves a cost. So the producer who are producing the goods, they are bearing a cost to produce a commodity, and so they charge a price for that commodity. Similarly, the services of the various factors of production, till now we were talking about the goods, but the services of the factors of production, they have also some price, right? For example, if the producers want to buy labor services, they are required to pay some price in the form of wages. Any of the factor of production, if you will purchase, you will purchase definitely, you will not be getting it free, right? All right, then prices are determined through the market forces of demand and supply, right? When you as a consumer, you demand, or you are demanding, as a producer you are demanding it, and this demand is always at a price. Similarly, if the producers are supplying something, or some factory owner is supplying something, they will be supplying the commodity at a price. So the prices are determined through the market forces of demand and supply, right? The buyers, that is any of the party, the buyer, depending on the good, whether it's a consumer good or a producer good, right? The buyers create the demand for goods and the sellers offer the supply of these goods to meet the demand of the buyers, right? The buyers, they demand the commodity, and the suppliers, they supply the commodity. But there is competition among the buyers to buy goods because the income is limited for them, right? Similarly, there is competition among the sellers to sell goods also. There are a lot of sellers who want to supply the commodity. It is through the interaction of the competition forces of demand and supply that the equilibrium price of a good, service, or a factor service is determined. Through the mutual interaction between demand forces and supply forces, the price of the commodity is determined. This price is known as equilibrium price. So equilibrium price is the price at which quantity demanded by the consumer equals the quantity supplied by the supplier. Now, competition among buyers and sellers ensures that the price ultimately settles down at the equilibrium level. That is, it is the level where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. You might be asking for any quantity, but whether you are getting that quantity at the prices that you are offering, one thing, the supplier may be willing to offer any of the quantity at the price, but is is he able to supply the quantity at the price he is offering? So there is a difference between at what price you are demanding and at what price sellers they are supplying. So mutually with the both the forces, with the mutual consensus of both these forces, the equilibrium price of the commodity is determined, and equilibrium price is the price at which quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied. All right, this is about price. Then there is general price level. What is it? The general price level refers to the average level of prices of all goods and services, not any one good but all goods and services produced in the economy. The overall price level in the economy is known as price. General price level, it is usually just called the price level, right? The general price level may increase or decrease during a particular time period. That is, the prices of all the commodities taken together may rise up or they may fall, right? So they are rising, they might be rising, or they are falling, but it is known as rise in price level or fall in price level, right? When there is a large increase in the general price level, it is known as inflation. That is what is there in your economy, right? You must be noticing the prices of all the commodities are rising persistently, continually, right? And that is what you mean by inflation in your economy, right? On the other hand, a large decrease in the general price level is called deflation. This is opposite of inflation. Now let us see the inflation also. So the next topic is inflation. Inflation is generally defined as the process of persistent, that is continuous, and appreciable, that is noticeable, rise in the general price level. Now there are certain features of this kind of inflation. Just to make it clear that what you are seeing is inflation, just a few points are given. Inflation refers to a process of rising prices and not a state of high prices. That is, if for certain time the prices are rising, it will not be termed as inflation. The prices of the commodity must rise continually for a long period, say 2 years, 3 years, then they will be considered as inflation. Second point is that is to be noted is inflation refers to a situation of appreciable or considerable rise in price. Now what do you mean by appreciable or considerable? It is only when the prices rise becomes excessive and unhealthy that it is regarded as inflationary in character. You can take the example of your own economy where you are seeing the price rise is very unhealthy and it is very excessive. So it is known as inflationary. Then rise in price should not be prolonged in order to be called a inflationary price rise. Inflation does not refer to it does not refer to a one-time rise in the price level, but rather to persistent rise in the price level. So what they are saying that a rise in price should be prolonged. That is, this rise of price must continue. Just now I said it must continue for a year, 2 years, and so on. That you may notice it, the people may notice it, and it is not good for them also. So that it is termed as inflationary in character. Then inflation is measured as the rate of increase in the price level as indicated by the price index, such as consumers price index, which we term as CPI, and wholesale price index, that is termed as WPI, right? These are the two indexes which shows the price rise, which shows or through which, with the help of which we can measure the inflation. Now there are two types of inflation. Because they are two forces which are operating the inflation. So similarly, because of that we have two kinds of inflation. One is demand pull inflation and the second is cost push inflation. Let us take up the first one, that is first let us see the meaning of this. Demand pull inflation. Inflation originating from the demand forces is called demand pull inflation. Now demand pull inflation occurs when the demand for goods and services exceeds, right, the supply available at the existing price. That is, when there is excess demand for goods and services at the present price level, right? Then inflation can be caused by factors operating from the supply side also, right? So cost push inflation refers to inflationary rise in prices which arise due to inflation in cost. All right. Now cost push inflation may be caused by increase in basically two factors: increase in wages cost, wage cost, and or increase in the profit margin. For instance, if wages increase, cost per unit will increase, and as a result the producers raise their prices to cover the higher cost, right? Sometimes producers may raise the prices of their products so as to earn higher profits. So these are two reasons. One is when the cost of production is rising, so the producers are raising the prices of the commodity to cover up the increased cost of production. The second is sometimes the producers, they wanted to raise their profit margin, and for that they are raising the prices of the commodity, which causes the cost push inflation. In recent times, there has been inflation because of a sharp jump in prices of petroleum in near future, not currently but in near future, because right now we are in lockdown. So prices of petroleum products, right? The next topic is value. Value of a commodity refers to the valuation placed by a household. That is what value we are giving to a commodity. One value is given by the household on the use, and the other value is the market value, that the value at which you purchase the commodity. So the word value has two different meanings basically: value in use and value in exchange. Value in use relates to consumption value of a commodity, that is when you are consuming it. It expresses the utility. This value is termed as utility derived from the consumption of a particular commodity. A necessary like water has a very high value in use or consumption value. The second type of value is value in exchange, that relates to market value of a commodity. It is the rate at which a particular good or service can be exchanged for other goods and services. We can take up an example that under barter system of exchange, if a weaver is prepared to exchange 1 meter of cloth with 5 kg of rice, then the value in exchange of 1 meter of cloth is 5 kg of rice. So value in exchange is the power of purchasing other goods, right? In modern monetized economies, the exchange value of goods expressed in terms of money and not in terms of other goods. Now value, that is value in exchange of a commodity, can be expressed in terms of nominal value and real value. That is value in exchange or monetary value can be expressed in two ways. One is nominal value and the second is real value. What is nominal value? Nominal value of a commodity referred to the value of a commodity measured in monetary units. What unit we can use or what unit we are using, such as rupees. For example, if 1 meter of cloth can be exchanged for rupees 200, its nominal value is rupees 200. Then real value of a commodity refers to the purchasing power of a commodity in terms of the other commodity. This type of value will exist in definitely barter exchange, right? In our example above that we have just discussed, real value of 1 meter of cloth is equal to 5 kg of rice. Now value in exchange or the market value, they are the same. Value of a commodity bears no necessary relation with value in use or consumption value, both the same, right? That means value in exchange or market value, one thing, they do not bear any necessary relationship with value in use or consumption value. These two are the synonymous to each other. They do not bear any kind of relationship with each other, because commodities which have high value in use may have very little value in exchange, and on the contrary, those commodities which have great value in exchange have little value in use. We can take an example such as water. They have it has very low exchange value because of exchange value in terms of price, right? Because on the one hand, because very and it has very low value in exchange but very high value in use, so they are not bearing any necessary relationship. On the other hand, luxury commodities such as diamonds, which have a low consumption value, that is value in use, they have a very high market value. What we are seeing is that the commodities which have high value in use, they have very low value in exchange. On the contrary, those commodities which have very low value, which have very high value in exchange, they have very little value in use. For this, we have given the example of diamond. Diamond has very low value in use, but it has a very high value in exchange. So this entire phenomena is termed as paradox of value by early economists. Now, the classical economists, they had not given any explanation for this paradox, but the modern economists, they have given an explanation of this paradox in terms of the fact that the market value or price of a commodity depends on demand and supply. Just now we have seen about price and demand and supply. Water has a very low price because it is available in plentiful amount. On the other hand, diamonds have a very high price because they are relatively scarce, and so they do not bear any necessary relationship. Because that is why the commodities which have very low value in use, they have very high market value, and the commodities which have very high value, they have very high market value, they have very low value in use, right? Next topic is, children, market. Now, prices, as we have studied already, they are determined by the forces of demand and supply. We have seen that, right? Now, forces of demand and supply, they operate within a framework, and that framework is known as market. So, market, the word market in the ordinary sense, from the perspective of a person who does not know the subject, means a physical place where commodities are bought and sold, such as Connaught Place, Chandni Chowk, Vegetable Market, Bombay Stock Exchange, Aminabad in our case, Hazratganj in our case. Alright, so from a layman's perspective, market is a area, is a place where which exists, which has a physical existence, right? So, the concept of market in this ordinary sense gives an idea of a single place to which people go to buy something. However, development in the means of transport and communication and expansion of banking network have helped in extending the concept of market, right? It is well beyond a single physical place. So, in case of many commodities like gold, there may be a world market, as these commodities can be purchased anywhere in the world at a uniform place. But if we view our current situations, if we observe our current situations when all of us are in the lockdown, children, right, we can very well understand that this concept of market is not a real, is not an economic concept, is not the concept with which we are dealing actually, because very rarely any of us are going to the market, but still we are purchasing the commodities. Then what is a market actually? In economics, the essential feature of a market, irrespective of its size and extent, is that buyers and sellers should be able to strike a bargain. That means me as a buyer and maybe you as a seller, both of us are able to communicate and strike a deal, finalize a deal. Wherever this thing is happening, that deal is known, or that entire phenomena is known as market. Let's see what economics say about the market. In economics, a market means a system or a setup in which the buyers and sellers of a commodity are able to interact and communicate. This is what we are doing right now in lockdown, right? They can interact and they are communicating with each other and strike a deal about the price and quantity to be bought and sold, right? uh, Economist J.L. Edward, he has given a definition for such a market. A market is the mechanism by which buyers and sellers are brought together. It is not necessarily a fixed place. This concept has very well this concept is very well known to us now when we are in the lockdown, that we are not going to market, but we are communicating, we are interacting with the all of us are communicating, maybe as a buyer or as a seller, and interacting with the other party in order to strike a deal, in order to finalize a deal. But we are not going to any physical place, right? Now, there are two distinguishing facts about such a market. Which market? The economics market. One, the market need not to be located in a particular place, right? That is, the geographical area of a market may be large or small depending on how scattered the buyers and sellers are, right? It may be a small market like a local market, or as large as the world market, like world market for wheat, cars, gold, aeroplanes, etc. Then second thing, buyers and sellers need not have personal contact with each other. They need to have a system of communication with each other to make a transaction. So transaction or deals can be made through correspondence or telephone, internet, etc. Right? So the size of a market refers to the amount of goods and services demanded in that market. The larger is the amount of goods and services demanded in a market, the larger is the size of that market. Now there are two types of market. One type is market for goods and the other type of market is the market of factor services. Now goods market are the market where goods and services are bought and sold. In such market, the sellers the sellers in such markets are usually the firms, right? We purchase the commodities from the shops, from the firms, from the big brands, right? So the firms, they are the sellers in such a market. The buyers may be a household, that is a consumer, or other firms, or the government. Any of the three can be a buyer in such a market. For example, cloth market and car markets are examples of goods market. The second type of market in this case is factor markets, and they are those markets where the factor services are bought and sold, such as labor market, capital market, etc. The buyers in such markets are the entrepreneurs and the sellers are the owners of factors of production. For example, in the labor markets, buyers are the entrepreneurs and sellers are the workers who are selling their labor services to the entrepreneur, right? So next topic is money. Now goods and services, just now you have talked about the market and goods market and services market. These goods and services as well as the factor services, we know about all these three things. They are sold and purchased in modern economies with the use of money. We sell commodities, we purchase commodities. We sell factor services, we purchase factor services with the help of money. These economies are based on specialization. Which economies? The modern economies. They are based on specialization and division of labor. I am sure that you have studied all this in class 10th. What do you mean by specialization and division of labor? So as a result of specialization, people produce a particular commodity. That is what you mean by specialization. The people, they produce a particular commodity in a greater quantity than they could consume themselves and trade most of it to obtain all the other things they require, right? We are not talking of exchange of money over here. We are saying that people who are specialized in some or the other commodities production, they produce that commodity in surplus more than they require, and then what they do, they find out person who is having some other commodity which they need, and just exchange the commodities with each other, right? So the specialization has been accompanied by exchange. So exchange is, what is it? It is the act of trading the surplus goods people have to obtain the other things which they require, right? So because before money was invented, goods were exchanged for goods, and this was the beginning of the barter system of exchange. And we know that barter system refers to the system of exchange where goods and services are exchanged directly for other goods and services, right? We need not to have an example for this. Now, the economy based upon the barter exchange is known as the barter economy. They still exist in some of the places in the world. But the barter system of exchange was a highly inefficient and clumsy, that is slow system of exchange. What we are going through now is, these are the drawbacks or the criticisms of barter system. First was that it was highly inefficient and clumsy system of exchange. Then it involved a waste of human efforts, right? Because the people, they were producing only with the commodity in which they were specialized, right? Then third, it restricted the scope of specialization and division of labor. The scope was very much restricted to the production of one commodity only, right? So overall, it was an obstacle to the expansion of the economy. So just to overcome all these difficulties that we have just discussed in the barter system, that every society invented some kind of money. So modern economies are money using economies, such as we are, right? The economy using money as a system of exchange for carrying out various types of economic transactions is known as money economy, right? The most transactions in these economies are carried out with the use of money. Crowther defines this money as anything that is generally acceptable as a means of exchange and at the same time act as a measure and store of value. What are the features that are coming out of this definition? The basic characteristic of money is that it is generally accepted as a means of payment for both goods and services and also for factor services. Now, general acceptability as a means of payment or as a medium of exchange is the unique feature of money, right? No other money carried this feature. Money is generally and widely used as the medium of exchange through which purchases of sales are made. At present, the money consists of currency and deposit money, or you can say the following are the components of money. One is currency, and currency comprises currency notes and coins. Currency notes refer to paper money and currency notes are issued by the Central Bank of India. I suppose you all know, which in India is known as the Reserve Bank of India. Then 5, 10, 20, 50, 100, 500, 2000 rupees notes, they are the examples of currency notes. Coins, they refer to metallic coins, 50 paise coins which is not in existence anymore, 2 rupees coin, 5 rupee coin, 10 rupee coin, 20 rupee coin now in existence. They are all examples of coins. Then deposit money or bank money also can be called. It refers to the deposits held with the bank on the basis of which checks can be drawn. That is, you deposit the money and you can issue a check asking the bank to give that money to you. Now, checks are widely used these days in making payments, particularly for trade and business transactions. This is all for money. The next topic is income. Now, income can be defined as a flow of goods and services or flow of money accruing to an individual or all the people in an economy over some specified time. This definition gives us a individual aspect also and a national overall aggregate aspect also. It is saying it is the flow of goods and services or flow of money. If it is a flow of goods and services, then we are talking about in terms of money, national income. It is a flow of money accruing to an individual then it is definitely we are talking about personal income, that is some specified time. This is what you mean by income. Then in modern monetized economies, income is expressed in money terms, all right, such as an individual earning an income of rupees 50,000 a month. Income measured in terms of some monetary units like rupee, dollar is known as money income. Now some people earn an income by selling commodities, right? They themselves have produced by their own labor, right? But in modern economics, in modern economies, they are characterized by specialization and division of labor. Just now you said that some people they earn income by selling the commodities they themselves have produced. But now what we are saying that the modern economies, they are characterized by specialization and division of labor. And if we go into it, we know that specialization and division of labor is it is a process based production, that is the production process is divided into different stages, right? So one person is not responsible for the production of the complete commodity. A person is responsible only for a part of it, right? So what is happening? People sell their factor services to firms and receive money income in the form of various factor incomes like wages, rent, interest, etc. So where is the difference? In the above said example, we were saying that people, they were selling the goods they themselves have produced. We can talk about barter system also over there. But here in modern economies, we are not selling the goods that we have produced altogether on our own, because we are working under specialization and division of labor. So the laborers, they are selling their factor services to the firms, right? And they are earning factor incomes like wages, rent, interest, etc. Whatever form of factor you are selling, you might be selling your labor, you might be selling your labor services, you might be giving capital, you might be giving entrepreneurship, whatever form of factor service you are offering, for that you are getting the payment in the form of income, right? So firms, now who purchases? Firms purchases or hire services of these factors of production and pay remuneration, that is their salary, that is their income, in the form of rent of land, wages of labor, interest on capital, and profits of entrepreneur. So factor income is the income earned by an individual largely by selling his factor services to firms. Wages, interest, rent, and profits are various categories of factor income. All this was, most of it was a micro phenomena, right, where we were talking about an individual. Now we come to a little of macro phenomena. So this entire concept applies to the economy as a whole, and when we study as a whole, we are studying the macro, that is all the firms in the economy produce goods and services, the sum total of which, that is the overall production taken together of all the firms taken together, is known as the nation's output. Now production requires factors of production whose owners are paid for factor services, that is they have provided it, that is nation's output, thus generate national income. So national income is defined as what? It is defined as the value of final goods and services produced by domestically owned, that is they are owned by the owners who are residing within the geographical boundaries, within the territory. So they are produced by domestically owned factors of production during a given period, right? Now there are three important things that needs to be noted here in terms for national income. One is that in first place, national income is expressed in monetary terms, right? That is, and why this is happening? Because we cannot add it together, unlike items such as apples and oranges, because their units of measure are different. Apples you are measuring in what? In kgs, right? apples and oranges you are measuring in kgs, or hairpins or aeroplanes, their unit of measurement is different, or services of barbers and doctors. So all these services are varied services, they are variety of services, and since they all are expressed in different units like kilograms, meters, etc., so in order to aggregate all goods and services, it is essential to express them in money terms such as rupee or dollars. So we are expressing national income in money terms, right? The second reason is that national income reflects the value of final goods and services. What do you mean by that? That is goods and services sold to the final users like households, right? Intermediate products, that is those goods and services which are further processed before they are used or sold to buyers, are excluded from national income. What are we adding? We are adding the value of final goods and services, and we are subtracting the value of intermediate goods from those values, right? All right. For example, national income includes the value of bread, right, and not of flour used in making bread, because the value of flour is already included in the value of bread. Then lastly, national income is the flow of final goods and services. That is, every flow concept like national income is expressed over a particular time period. Conventionally, national income is expressed over 1 year. That is, we can say that the national income of India in 2015-16 was estimated at rupees 99,82,100 crores. This is how we can express national income. Now, often we use another national income aggregate which is known as gross domestic product or GDP, right? You must have heard that term in news, right? Now, GDP is defined as the value of all final goods and services produced by all the enterprises located within the domestic territory of a country, right? Some of these enterprises may be owned by domestic people, while some other may be owned by foreign residents, right? That is, some of the industries we have, they may be domestic industries, some other industries may be owned by the foreigners, right? Now, these enterprises give rise to factor income to domestically owned factors of production, as well as to the factor services owned by foreign residents. What is happening over here? That the foreign enterprises which are working over here, these enterprises, they are giving a rise to factor income. This factor income will be remitted to their countries to which they belong. On the same token, those enterprises which are Indian and they are settled abroad, they are also earning a factor income, and that factor income will be remitted to us in India. This is what you mean by factor income earned. All right. So some of the domestically owned factors of production may earn income by operating abroad. That is what I said, right? Some of the Indians, they are working abroad, some enterprises are working abroad. On the same token, some foreign enterprises are also working in India. Now, national income, that is gross national product, differs from GDP. GDP is the gross domestic product, whereas GNP is the gross national product. So there is a difference between GDP and GNP. GDP is the production that is done within the geographical boundaries of your economy, whereas GNP is the national product, that is, we add factor income from abroad. The term that we just talked about, the factor income which we are getting from abroad, we add that factor income to the GDP and then it becomes GNP. All right. Or we can say that the GDP differs from GNP to the extent of net factor income from abroad. That is the difference between the factor income received from abroad and the factor income accruing to the foreigners. For this you have a formula, that is national income is equal to GDP plus net factor income from abroad. Right, we will be discussing this concept later on in the other chapter. Then the next concept is per capita income. Per capita income of a country is the average income of the normal residents of a country in a particular year. Right. Now, the normal residents are those residents whose economic interest lies in the country where they are working, where they are living. Right. They are known as normal residents. It is income per head of population. It is obtained by dividing national income of a country by its population. Right. So, per capita income is traditionally taken as an index of measure of economic welfare. That is, as much as the per capita income, that much is the economic welfare of the economy. That is what it is supposed to be, and economic development also. An increase in per capita income leads to improvement in the living standards of the people as well as the economic development of the country. Right. Alright, and the next topic that we are going to take up is saving. Now, saving, it refers to that part of the income which is not spent on consumption. This is what you mean by saving. Now, income is received as wages, as salaries, rent, interest. In various forms, income is received. Right? Now, household buy consumer goods they need with this income, but they do not spend the entire income on the purchase of consumer goods, right? A part of the income may be saved by these people. So, saving is the income that households receive but do not spend on purchasing goods and services. Household would like to save a part of the income they earn for various reasons, like meeting the expenditure on higher education of their children, construction of residential houses, or for the marriage of their children, or to provide for old age, etc. Right? So these are various reasons for which people like to save. So they do not spend the entire income on consumption of goods and services. Now the saving which is done by the households is known as personal saving. Actually, we can say we have three types of saving. First is personal saving, then business saving, and then government saving. So personal saving is the saving which is done by the household, right? Then business saving is the saving that is done by the business people, and it is achieved by not distributing to shareholders all the profits made in a year. That is, whatever profit they are making in a year, they are not distributing the entire profit to the shareholder, but a part of it they are retaining back. What are they doing? They retain some profits, are usually retained either to be plowed back for the expansion of the business or to be held as liquid reserves. For these two reasons, the business class, the businessmen, they retain certain part of their profit, and this is known as business saving. Then government saving is a saving done by the central government, state government, local authorities and public corporations. Government saving is achieved mainly through a budget surplus. And what is a budget surplus? That is when the government revenue is exceeding government expenditure. That is what you mean by government surplus budget. Now, saving done by an individual income earner is known as individual saving. Saving by individuals, by families and by business firms is known as private saving. I hope you are catching. That is, saving when it is done by an individual or a household, it is individual saving, and saving by individuals, by families and by business firms together is known as private saving. It is the saving done by everyone other than the government in the economy. What is the saving? That is the private saving. Now, the aggregate saving or the total saving is the total saving done by all the people in an economy. It is the sum total of private and government saving. So, savings is the total amount of saving accumulated over time. It is the accumulated value of past saving, right? The next topic is investment. Investment is defined as the act of using production resources for the production of capital goods, that is, goods that are used for producing other goods and services in the future. It is the act of adding to the existing stock of real capital. What do you mean by real capital? Such as machinery, tools, equipments, buildings, stock of goods, etc. When you add to it, it is known as investment, right? Now these goods are produced largely by firms, and they may be bought by firms, by households, or by the government. So another form or another name for investment is also capital formation. Investment and capital formation are synonymous for each other. The essence of investment is the diversion of a part of society's currently available resources for the purpose of increasing the stock of investment goods so as to make possible an increase in consumable output in future, right? Now there are certain components of, what are the components of investment? First is producer's fixed investment. And what are its components? It consists of capital goods such as plants, equipments, etc. Now capital goods are often called producer's fixed investment also, right? This is what we said in the beginning. The first caption was that. Then second component of investment is investment in residential housing and non-residential structure. This includes investment made in the construction of residential houses and non-residential structures also, like office buildings, power plants, bridges, roads, etc. Right? But here a residential house gives utility slowly over a long period. For this reason, housing construction is taken as investment rather than as consumption. Investment in residential housing is different from other forms of investment in that houses are sold to households while other investment goods are sold to firms. Then third is investment in stocks. All firms keep stock of raw material, semi-finished goods and finished goods in factories or shops, right, for the smooth functioning of the business. Now, a net addition to stocks is considered as an investment because it represents goods produced but not used for current consumption. Alright, so these are the three components of investment, and the sum total of expenditure on all investment goods, that is first producer's fixed investment, then business, construction, residential housing, stock, is called gross investment, right? This is one thing. Now during this investment, during this process of capital formation, physical wear and tear of capital goods takes place in the process of production, which is known as depreciation. So actually, what do you mean by depreciation? It is the investment required to keep the existing stock of capital intact by replacing what has been worn out or otherwise used up in the process of production is known as replacement investment or depreciation, right? Now, by deducting depreciation from gross investment is the investment on all the three components, right? When you deduct the amount of depreciation from gross investment, we get net investment. It is the net investment which increases the total stock of capital in the economy, right? Because the depreciation amount is used for the wear and tear of the capital goods. It is not actually adding anything to the stock of capital goods. So when we deduct the amount of depreciation, the actual picture is the actual investment, that is the net investment which is made in the economy, and that only tells the actual picture of the development of the economy. Then next is wealth. Wealth, it refers to the stock of all those assets which are a source of income. Now, wealth is a stock concept and therefore it is expressed at a point of time, may say on January 1, 2017, right? So according to Henson, he has given a definition for wealth. He says that wealth is a stock of goods at a certain time which conform to the requirements of possessing utility. These are the features. If it is wealth, these are the features of possessing utility, limited in supply, transferability of their ownership from one person to the other. Anything to be regarded as wealth must possess the following characteristics. I will just name them. Utility, you already know what do you mean by utility. It must give some satisfaction to the owner. Scarcity, it should be scarce in its supply or availability. Transferability, it should be transferable, that its ownership can be transferred from one person to the another person. And then fourth is exchange value. It must have exchange value, that is all those goods which have the characteristic of utility, scarcity and transferability, they all possess exchange value, right? Now there are two types of wealth, we can say, right? First is individual or personal wealth. It refers to stock of all those assets which are owned by a person, right? At any moment in time, individuals in an economy have a given stock of wealth. This wealth is held in many forms. Now, like different ways of holding wealth by individuals may be grouped into three main categories, right? Now, what are these categories? First is, some wealth is held as money in hand or in bank, like paper money, coins and checkable deposit with bank. This is one form. Then wealth is partly kept in the form of financial assets other than money, such as bonds earning a fixed rate of interest, deposits with the companies, shares of the companies, etc. This is the second form, right? And then second category and third category is real asset. Real asset is in the form of houses, farms and family businesses. So these are the three categories of wealth that an individual can hold, right? Now the wealth of an entire nation, the second type of wealth is the national wealth. And what is it? It is the stock of all tangible, that is real, which can be touched, right? Wealth that contributes to the production of goods and services. Tangible wealth consists of two categories. First is reproducible assets. As the name suggests, that they are man-made and therefore can be reproduced. They consist of one, fixed assets such as machinery and equipments of all kinds, and buildings and other structure. Some of these reproducible assets like machines, factories, they contribute to the production of goods and services which people want, while some other like houses, they satisfy the wants of the people directly. The second the second part is stocks of durable goods, that is inventories, which are used for the satisfaction of people's wants directly, that is the stock of consumer goods, and indirectly stock of raw materials. Then the second main bifurcation of it is first was reproducible assets, under which we had A and B categories. Then the second is non-reproducible assets. Now the non-reproducible assets, they consist of natural resources. As the name suggests, they cannot be reproduced again anymore. So they are natural resources such as land, minerals, wealth, forests, etc., which are created by nature, and they are regarded as free gifts of nature. So national wealth in general practice includes both reproducible assets and non-reproducible assets. Some economists take a wider definition of national wealth so as to include in addition to what? Reproducible and non-reproducible. In addition to this, they also take into their category human capital. And in human capital, we involve education, skills, training and health. It is a wider concept of wealth. And technological capital, that is colleges, universities and libraries also are part of this type of concept. Now, it is important to note that financial assets held by domestic residents are not part of national wealth. Why? Because the value of the domestic financial assets is offset by the domestic financial liabilities. That is, if you have the asset, they create the liabilities of the same amount. So they cannot be considered as national wealth. For example, money deposited by an individual in a bank is an asset for the depositor, but a liability for the bank, because the bank has to give it back to the depositor. This deposit in the bank does not represent wealth for the economy as a whole. However, net foreign financial assets are part of national wealth. Next is welfare. Now, welfare is taken to mean a sense of satisfaction and happiness, a sense of well-being among the people. Many factors they influence this sense of satisfaction and well-being among the people, such as consumption of goods and services, environment, family relations, degree of freedom, law and order situations, right? But some of the factors they increase wealth, and some of the factors they decrease welfare. I'm talking of welfare, right? Now, the factors which increase welfare, it can be more of consumption of commodities, more leisure, good weather, more freedom. And the factors which decrease welfare may be natural disasters, more work, right? Political instability. All these factors may decrease or reduce your welfare. Now, some of the factors affecting welfare of the people of a country can be expressed in money terms, right? For example, factors like national income, consumption, investment, they can be expressed in monetary terms. And however, some of the factors influencing welfare cannot be expressed in monetary terms, such as environment, social relations in the society, understanding among family members, law and order. All these things, these factors cannot be taken care by, cannot be expressed in monetary terms. So we can distinguish between the two types of welfare. One is economic and the other is non-economic welfare. So straight away we can say that the welfare which is affected by the factors which can be expressed in monetary terms is called economic welfare. Now, Piaget has defined this economic welfare as that it is a part of social welfare that can be directly or indirectly measured in money terms. So, such type of factors can be national income, per capita income, composition of output, consumption, etc. They are all termed as economic welfare. The non-economic welfare, we can say it is the welfare influenced by non-economic factors such as environment, social relations in the society, law and order, degree of freedom, etc. The non-economic welfare relates to non-economic values of the people in the society, right? It relates to social and political and moral values of the people in the society. So we can express non-economic welfare. It is the welfare which cannot be expressed in monetary terms is called non-economic welfare. The examples of such kind of welfare are political welfare and moral welfare. So we have two categories. Then if we sum them up, that is the total welfare of the people of a country is the sum total of economic and non-economic welfare. Since it is the welfare of the society as a whole, both economic and non-economic, it is termed as social welfare, and so we termed economic welfare as part of social welfare, right? So social welfare is defined as the sum total of the happiness of all the individuals in the society. It is the sum of economic and non-economic welfare. Now, welfare is closely related to wealth. We can understand that, right? Generally, there is a direct relationship between the amount of wealth and the level of economic welfare. The more is the amount of wealth, the more is the level of economic welfare, and vice versa, because we have already seen the examples of economic welfare. This is national income, per capita income. All these are talking about the money terms, right? They are all expressed in money terms, so they are influenced by the wealth of a person. The next topic is, children, business cycle. Now, business cycle is defined as the recurrent fluctuations in the aggregate economic activity in an economy. Now, what is the aggregate economic activity? We can categorize economic activity into three areas: income, output, and employment. When there are recurrent fluctuations in these three areas, what the areas? Income, output, and employment, then we term it as business cycle. We can also term them as short-term fluctuations, right? Now, in a business cycle, there are wave-like fluctuations in aggregate, that is the total output, total income, and total employment. So we have certain four phases. We can categorize four phases of business cycle. They are expansion or prosperity, recession, depression, and recovery or revival. What happens in expansion or prosperity? It is a phase where expansion in the level of output, employment, and income takes place. That is, all these three, they rise up, right? Then recession is a downward trend in the level of economic activity. It is a sustained, that is, it continues. It is a continued period of falling level of income, output, and employment. Then depression is a phase of severe recession, that is, it is characterized by severe and general decline in the level of all three: income, output, and employment. There is a large reduction in employment, output, and income, and prices as well. And then recovery is, that is, it is a situation, or it is a revival of economic activity from the situation of depression. During this phase, the level of output, employment, and income in the economy rise steadily, right? So these are the four phases. There is a simple diagram, and it is there in your book. You can see it, right? Then the next is aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Straight away, aggregate demand is defined as the total amount of goods which all the buyers of final output in the economy desire to purchase. It is an ex ante concept. It is the total desired purchases of all the buyers in the economy. In a closed economy, goods are demanded by household. We represent household for consumption with C. Goods are demanded by the firms or producers for taking investment. We represent it by I. And the government also purchases various types of goods, and we represent government by G. So we have three components of aggregate demand: C, household for consumption; I, business for investment; and G, government, various types of goods, right? So the components of aggregate demand in an economy are C plus I plus G, right? So the aggregate demand, or the quantity of goods which all the buyers in the economy desire to purchase, depends generally on the level of income in the economy. The next is aggregate supply. It refers to the total amount of output which all the firms or producers are willing, again accent, to produce in an economy, right? We may also express aggregate demand and aggregate supply in relation to the price level. In this reference, the aggregate demand refers to the total quantity of goods and services which all the buyers of an economy want to buy at different prices. And aggregate supply, on the other hand, refers to the total quantity of goods and services which all the firms are willing to supply at different prices, right? So this is aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Then in every economy there are basic entities, and we have three entities in our economy: household, firm, and government, about which we are studying throughout this chapter. Their role we are studying. A household is defined as a person or group of people. They are living together who take economic decisions about the types of commodities to be purchased to satisfy the wants of his, if the individual one is there, or there if the family is there. At the same time, households are the main owners of productive resources like land, labor, and capital. Households, they own the factors of production. So therefore they take decisions about the use of factor services as well. Thus households participate in economic activities in two different capacities, that is, one as the owner and supplier of productive resources, and as the consumer of goods and services produced and supplied by the business firm. Our next entity is firm. Firms. A firm is defined as the entity which employs factors of production to produce commodities that it sells to other people. Now, an individual or a unit or an organization, an individual or a unit or an organization that produces goods and services is called a firm. In economics, we can use the term firms, producers, or suppliers interchangeably, right? They are the synonyms for each other. Firms, on the one hand, act as producers in the commodity market, and because they sell the commodities after producing, and on the other hand, they purchase factor services from the household. So, they are the purchasers of factor services in the factor market also. Now, the third and last entity is the government, and government refers to a group of organizations which possesses legal and political power and exercises some control over other sectors of the economy. Now, government includes local authorities, state government, central government, and other organizations belonging to the government, right? Such as the central government or central bank of a country. Now, the government gets its income largely from the taxes which are imposed on the households and the business sector. It spends the money so earned from the household and business firm to discharge various functions in the economy. For example, administration, law and order, maintenance of law and order, construction of railways, highways, dams, and etc. The last topic of the chapter is stock and flow variables. Stock variables are the variables which are expressed at a point of time, such as a stock of. So we can say these variables have no time dimension. They are expressed at a point of time, so have no time dimension. Stock of capital, stock of wealth, number of persons employed, total bank deposits, total money supply. There are certain examples of stock variables. So we can say, suppose the stock of capital in a factory on a particular day at a point of time like January 1, 2017, right? Then flow variables are the variables that are expressed per unit of time, right? Such as per hour, per month, or per year. So flow variables have a time dimension. For example, production, national income, consumption, saving, investment, export, import, all these are flow variables, right? We express national income of India over a period of 1 year, right? So these are stock variables and flow variable, and with this, children, the chapter is done.